Welcome to the Global Gaming Business Podcast, the industry's first and longest running podcast, now in our 16th year. This week we sit down with Sara Slane, who as a vice president with the American Gaming Association led the campaign to legalize sports betting in the U.S. after PASPA was repealed. This month, IGT celebrates 25 years of Wheel of Fortune slots, the brand players seek on every casino floor for its life-changing jackpots. Learn more at IGT.com/WOFslots25. Welcome to the Global Gaming Business Podcast. Our guest today is Sara Slane. Sara had a lot to do with the campaign to legalize sports betting when she was an executive at the American Gaming Association and really changed gaming to what we see today, which is nothing like it was before the legalization of sports betting. So, Sara, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Roger. Thanks for having me. I like how you said that it's nothing like what it used to be. Hopefully that means it's getting better.
Yes, definitely getting better. Yeah. Well, we had a little bump in the road there with COVID, but I think we're coming back pretty strong now. So we're good. True. So, we've seen so many states come on just this year, whether it be through legalization or getting the regulations down and finally opening up. And even some states like Hawaii, said, there was a bill in their legislature at one point to legalize sports betting, which they have no betting at all there. So, it's really growing. How many states do you think it's going to be in, when all is said and done?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I was going through the numbers the other day, and I think we're up to 25 or 26 states that have enacted
right.
Legislation, and then the District of Columbia. And then I counted, and I think there were like another 18 states that were debating legislation. So it was somewhere around 44 or something like that. And
right.
I was shocked. I could not believe, how many states have been talking about legalizing sports betting and or have moved toward that in such a fast, at such a fast clip. And,
yeah.
at the end of the day, how many states do I expect to be legalized sports betting? It'll probably mirror how many commercial, tribal, supplier, lottery states there are, which I think is around 43.
Right.
So look, I guess that shouldn't come as such a surprise. What should be more surprising is at the clip at which it's been happening. That's
right. Yeah.
Shocking.
Very, very fast for sure. So one of the bigger states that finally got involved was New York, and they just announced a bill that Governor Cuomo signed. But I don't understand it. Can you explain it? I mean, there's just so many caveats in there that don't seem like it's going to work out that well.
Yeah. I feel very passionate about this piece of legislation. Mm-hmm. I think it is so terrible for the industry, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Look, on one hand, am I really happy that New York opened up the state for legalized sports betting? Yes. On the other hand, it is a be careful what you wish for situation. And, I think when I was at the American Gaming Association and when I was at MGM, there was a tendency sometimes for the industry to outbid itself. And what this has now set up in New York is this kind of race to the bottom on tax rates. Like right. You can ever throw out the largest tax rate now. And I know there's going to be other deciding factors. I get it. I'm not, but I just think I think it's bad for the industry. I think it's not thoughtful. I don't think it really looks at the holistic picture of the entire industry. I think that, New York could have done some really interesting things that would have moved their entire gaming program forward and really been a much larger economic driver for the state than the way that they seem to view this, which was very much in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. So look, there's been a lot of confusion around definition of platform. I'm under the impression that there will obviously be some sort of FAQ that's going to be issued in the next couple of days as operators start to gear up for the RFP process. But all in all, I think it's not a great model. I think it's just not going to serve consumers extremely well, given that it's going to be a somewhat limited market. And I think, again, it's going to be such a huge tax rate that I'm not even sure that the operators that end up getting into the state are going to necessarily be profitable. So right. I give it an F
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, every
Two
state.
thumbs down. How about that?
Okay, that's good.
How
Good.
about that reference? Yeah.
Yeah, right. 1 star. So, every state obviously has a different way they set it up, and some states, Tennessee, for example, where there's no casinos, DC, where there's no casinos, have gone through their lotteries, and they haven't really been successful. I mean, certainly Tennessee has gotten a lot of revenue, but then they have this payday loan company running sports betting, and just doesn't sound like they've got it together. And then, not to mention losing two very qualified women who were running their sports betting operations within the first year. So what do you think the lottery running it is a bad idea, or they just don't really get it in terms of how it should be run?
I wouldn't want to paint a broad brushstroke against the lottery. Like I don't think that that's the issue. Is there something to be said about having experience as a state? And it's hard, right? Like sports betting it is a newer platform for most states outside of Nevada. But adopting best practices and looking at the other states, especially when you're coming on a little bit later, like Tennessee was, you don't need to recreate the wheel. Like there are really good standards that are in place right now that, have served gaming very well, that you just sort of rinse and repeat. So I don't know the ins and outs of why they seem to have stumbled out of the gate. I just don't know. And I don't think that you can say it's the lottery's fault or it's so-and-so's fault. I mean, I'm sure it's a combination of a couple things. What I think is not great is what's happened now with, one of the operators that's had some issues there. And it's not a great look, right, for the industry. Right. And it certainly, I think when in an industry that operates around integrity and around a strict, very strict regulatory structure and, really was put in place, a legitimate industry was put in place to sort of take out the illegitimate industry and the illegal industry. We have to hold that bar up and we've got to continue to, to really set a high standard for how things are going to be done. And so I'm hoping this is a lesson that they learn from and that they course correct. And that's great. Like we all do that. We all make mistakes and hopefully that's the takeaway. But, it's been interesting, just sort of how each state has adopted its own model. And even though, I think you can look around and see what's worked and what's not worked. And, kind of brings us back to New York too. Like New Hampshire seems to be the reference point that they keep referring to as their model. And, I think you could make an argument that hasn't been entirely successful in New Hampshire. So.
Well, another thing about Tennessee and DC, they both demanded that they make 10% profit on this, and if you make 5% profit, you're having a banner year. So that means
sports betting,
right. That means they have to either give the players worse odds or get it somewhere else from their operator. So I don't think that makes a lot of sense, and it shows us that they don't really understand how sports betting works.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when you lead with we want to generate the most amount of money possible in a very sort of black and white term, it's going to end up leading you to really bad policies. We used to call, even with problem gambling, we used to call it the politics of problem gambling, because it wasn't necessarily putting an ATM machine 20 feet from the floor versus 10 feet from the floor that you were going to stop people from having problem gambling issues. It was the perception of it. It was truly like, what are the politics around how we're going to be perceived for problem gambling? And what are some policies that we can put in place that aren't really rooted in science or really going to help a customer that's got a gambling problem, but rather what's going to make us look good? Right. And so I think that can be really detrimental at the end of the day to the overarching, program and the success of the program. And you referenced DC. I happen to live in Maryland, so I'm somewhat familiar kind of with what's happened. And, they were intent on having a single operator in the state through the lottery, in the district. And then, the stadiums and arenas were going to have a certain allotment for geofencing some of the other operators. And it just has not led to this competitive marketplace. And in fact, the numbers have been extremely stark in that. William Hill, who opened up Caesars, I guess now, who's now opened the retail book at Monumental, is crushing the online Intralot app through the DC lottery. And, it's I think all the operators really tried to work with the lottery to talk to them about the reality of that situation and what was going to transpire. And unfortunately, it has.
Right. Well, I guess you get some of these things when as you mentioned before, sports betting has gone so quickly here, been legalized so quickly, and they want to get it up and running so quickly, and it's really complicated, sports betting. I mean, when you talk about the geofencing, the KYC, payment processing, all these items and they all have to work together. And do you think states really understand how complicated it is before they get into it?
I don't know if they understand how complicated it is. I'm not sure that they understand how low margin of a business it is.
Right.
That this isn't the panacea for the industry. And
right.
I mean, when I was at the AGA and we were advocating for legalization, that was always kind of our talking point was it's not the panacea.
Right.
Now, I will say where this has been unbelievable for the industry is that we are truly now taking what has largely been a brick and mortar experience to an online platform, which, we're one of the last industries, if not the last industry, to be able to have done that. And the pain of having gone through all the internet gaming debates. So certainly the sports betting is now the camel's nose under the tent for online casino, which is far more profitable.
Right.
But I think that, yes, I think legislators get very confused sometimes when they see these big handle numbers, which if you're in the industry, is not reflective at all of what you end up with at the end of the day, given that it's about 5 to 7% average hold. Right.
So we did a story a few months ago on who's making money in sports betting, and the consensus was it's just the suppliers at this point. How long is it going to be before any of these companies really start to make serious money off of sports betting?
Yeah, I don't know if that's entirely true. I think FanDuel's profitable in New Jersey, and I think there are some other operators that are definitely turning the corner in that regard. I think if it's proven anything, being an omni-channel certainly helps. So having brick and mortar, it's like investing in your portfolio, right? You need to have some diversification. You can't just lead with sort of sports betting. If you've got online casino, you've got horse racing, you've got some brick and mortar presence, that whole belt and suspenders certainly does diversify your portfolio and, I think lead to probably more profit generation through that. So do I think that, right now, of course, marketing expenses are through the roof. Operators are busy trying to acquire customers. They're competing with one another. We're at the beginning stages, of the industry. And as we start to kind of level out, we see bigger states like New York come online, maybe Florida, maybe Texas, maybe California. I think the playing field will start to level out a bit and we will start to see some more profitability. But I'm not entirely convinced it's going to be through just a sports betting application. I do think it'll be through sort of an omni-channel presence online.
For big money thrills, Wheel of Fortune Slots is the one your players seek. The game that's awarded over $3.3 billion in jackpots is celebrating 25 years as the top performing slot brand. With more than 1,100 millionaires created in a quarter of a century, Wheel of Fortune Slots delivers heart-pounding thrills for every player, every time. Celebrate with us as we unveil new Wheel of Fortune games and player promotions designed to drive excitement to your floor. Visit IGT.com/WOFslots25 for more information. Now, back to our podcast.
So we've been talking about the tax rate, and I think that kind of went off the rails in Pennsylvania when they put on, tax rate north of 34%, and then you mentioned New York having also a high tax rate. Now, I've talked to people in Pennsylvania who run operations there, and they said the only reason they signed up for sports betting is because it gave them an entree into online gaming. And, they don't expect to make any money on the sports betting, but certainly do on the online casino. So is that the pathway you're talking about here? That do you think other states are going to do that as well?
I think that's exactly where they end up getting incentivized around was that there was online gaming, which is far more profitable. The bonusing in sports betting is, I think it's the highest like in the country, or they're able to deduct that as well. So they, everyone is pushing to these exorbitant sort of bonusing, and then obviously hoping that you're converting into an online gaming consumer. So that, it's been an interesting model. And I think, the industry kind of got out really quickly and said, look, 36% tax rate and $10 million licensing fee is ridiculous.
Right.
It is a much more limited market. I think there's only 12 entry points into Pennsylvania. So it's, it's a little bit smaller. They are competing. They're getting up there with New Jersey, but they probably would have surpassed New Jersey had it not been for that 36% tax rate.
Mm-hmm. And the states are going to realize at some point as well that they're not making as much taxes from sports betting as they were hoping they were going to make, and then they're going to show them online gaming and say, well, look how much taxes you can make on this. And so is that going to be a factor as well in states approving online gaming?
Gosh, I wish I had the special sauce for how to legalize online gaming, because I spent 10 years working on trying to get it done, and it's a tough sell.
Right.
Especially if you can't get interest in the state aligned behind wanting to see it legalized, right? Like there is still a belief, and I think that to a degree, there's probably some of it is true, that there's cannibalization that's going to occur from having now a mobile platform and a mobile casino, that a consumer wouldn't necessarily then be interested in going into the brick and mortar operation and playing a table game or playing the slots if they can do it, easier with their phone.
Right.
So that's a tough sell. I also think that the perception around online gaming is harder. I think that the ease of access for being able to play slots or blackjack or roulette, it's a mental hurdle. You have to kind of get legislators over that hump.
Right.
The flip side of this is it's happening, it's happening anyway. It's happening around the world. We're obviously making progress safely with online sports betting. From a tax proceed perspective, of course, it's going to generate more in taxes, and, done the right way, it really does kind of complete the package then of a brick and mortar operation. So that's going to be a longer slog. That is not going to be the sports betting rollout that we've seen, this aggressive sports betting rollout, but we'll get there. We will get there.
Right. Okay, great. So we've seen a lot of professional leagues and professional teams make deals with sports betting companies, and most of the time, the details aren't announced. So can you just run through it for me? What's in it for the teams, and what's in it for the sports books to make these kind of deals?
Sure. I think in every day seems to be morphing more and more and more. When I originally kind of went out on my own almost 2 years ago, what I sort of set out to do, although the objective still remains the same, the partnerships are changing.
Right.
So between the team and an operator, between a league and an operator, there are certain assets, right, that get unlocked through those partnerships, be it either media, digital, IP, media integrations, those typical kind of sponsorship marketing packages. And then now what we've started to see is, and Arizona is a really good example of this, is this market access partnership. Right. So, and in all fairness, District DC was the first jurisdiction then to move forward with this kind of model, which was, a partnership with a gaming operator to open a brick and mortar sports book. And then they had some limited mobile around the arena. Mm-hmm. Arizona now is the first state where the license is controlled by the team and they designate it to then an operator. So that integration is going to be really interesting to see how that all rolls out. I think it's really synergistic. I think it makes a ton of sense. It creates a lot of efficiencies, especially from an operator side and from a team side, that, an operator was going to have to more than likely spend the money with the team for advertising and anyway, but to now link up a more direct partnership, I think is going to unlock tremendous benefit for both sides of the equation.
Okay. But in terms of, say, the deals they're making with individual teams that have nothing to do with the stadiums itself, I mean, is that just basically a sponsorship deal, that kind of thing, like you'd see with any brand?
Yeah, I mean, it typically, I think the differentiating factor with the gaming industry and a team is that if you don't have, let's say, a traditional sort of sportsbook operation, are these branded lounges.
Right.
I think there's also incentive from an affiliate marketing side, like if you can help drive traffic,
Sure.
through partnership, there's upside in that. But generally speaking, it is a pretty typical kind of partnership. Maybe more sophisticated on the digital asset side if they have a free-to-play game or something along those lines. But I think that the thing that has changed is that those partnerships this wasn't even a category that existed, right? Like this wasn't even a possibility for the teams or the leagues to enter into them. And now it is.
Okay. So do you think sports betting is getting a little too overexposed when it comes to deals like this, that, they're talking about putting the logos on uniforms and things of that nature as well? I mean, we've already seen some pushback in Europe on that kind of stuff. And of course, you remember when the DFS companies were out there early on a few years ago, and it just seemed like every other commercial was an ad for DFS, and that led to a crackdown on them. So, do you think that could happen in sports betting?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the thing that everyone is trying to caution against is going down this path of oversaturation, too much marketing, way too much in everyone's face. That ended up in Europe leading to a regulatory backlash. And so I think that is absolutely something that, the industry, the gaming industry and the teams, leagues, media companies are in agreement on, is that, look, we got to be careful about not doing too much and really turning people off. And, and again, and raising, the regulatory agencies, be it federal or state, then to come down on deceptive, unfair, whatever advertising practices. So, when I was at AGA, there was a lot that we tried to do to get in front of that. We started the Have a Game Plan, the responsible gaming sort of communication plan. We got the industry to agree on a responsible gaming marketing code. And I think the other piece that quite frankly is very different than Europe is that we have centralized leagues. So NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA Tour, they have their own policies and codes of conduct, and they have put in place then parameters around how much advertising can occur, where it can occur, what kind of integrations can occur, how are you using trademarks, logos, brands, everything else. So I do feel like and same with the media companies, right? Like they set the rules, they set the, for how much advertising can happen. So I do feel like we have a little bit more of not an official regulated place, but we have more so than I think the Europeans did.
Sure. Okay. That makes sense. So if a state comes to you and says, we want to legalize sports betting, how should we do it? Is there one state that you can point to that say they did it right? They did it almost exactly right?
I mean, I think everyone always goes back to New Jersey, right? They've had such great success. It's why they're the number one leader in the marketplace right now. But New Jersey learned, right? Like that's what I'm saying with Tennessee. Like, hopefully there's a course correction here.
Right.
New Jersey learned with Atlantic City that they had to modernize and they had to stay in front of it. And they had to work, very much view their relationship with the industry as a partnership.
Sure.
And reinvest and do everything else. And so that is what made them lean in more, because they felt the downside of losing all that money to neighboring states because they just didn't pivot quick enough and they didn't have that reinvestment going into Atlantic City. So it's a great example of honestly having made a mistake and setting course the right way. And they've got great regulators, again, who very much view their partnership with the industry that way. They view it as a partnership. They've allowed for a somewhat, free market with a very reasonable tax rate, online casino. They have, I think it's called Jersey First, where they try to fast track new programs, because it is such a heavily regulated industry. That's what's, I think, kept a lot of innovation out, quite frankly. It was just the cost, the expense. Are you going to, you go through R&D and then a regulator says, sorry, we don't approve it. And it's a lot of time, energy, money wasted. So they've done, I think, just collectively an amazing job at really enabling the industry and empowering the industry to grow and succeed and thrive. I mean, the other one that I'm sure you're going to get to here is they don't require in-person registration in the state. So that is a huge barrier to entry. And, I think something that, quite frankly, Nevada has faltered on. So in other states, and we've seen it's very black and white that when you require that, you're just not going to generate the kind of money that you could if you didn't.
So a lot of people don't realize there's a federal excise tax on sports betting as well, 0.25%. There's 2 congressmen now that are putting up a bill to repeal that. Is there a chance that will happen?
I hope so. I'm always skeptical about anything getting done in Congress. And by the way, Congress was set up that way so that not a whole lot got done, in fairness. I hope so. It was put in place to really penalize sports betting. There's also a head tax. So for actually employing people, you're being penalized as an operator. Like, I can't think of another industry that has something like that.
Sure.
So as we continue to mainstream and we continue to expand throughout the U.S., hopefully that there's a compelling enough reason as to why something like that would need to change. Right.
And then there's also the Wire Act, which was passed in the early 60s and is a real impediment to spreading sports betting across the country, even if the states all agree to it. And is there a chance that could be modified so those compacts between states could be allowed?
Well, compacts between states are allowed. I mean, New Jersey and Delaware and Nevada all have. Yes. I mean, in fairness, you're right, for poker, but it's hard. It's really hard to get anything done federally. Really difficult. We'll see as more states continue to move forward. And I mean, we get to just such a huge tipping point that there's a federal regulatory framework, and getting rid of the Wire Act makes a lot of sense. I think it's really hard to get legislators to support the largest expansion of gaming, even though it's happening. I think federal legislators are more than happy to kick the can down the road and or to push it back to the states to make decisions, which is where largely gaming has taken place. Gaming decisions have taken place. So I think it's tough unless there was some extremely coordinated effort from the industry that everyone was on the same page, that, we were going to go try and pursue something that way. I think it's hard.
Okay. All right. Well, one more question. Part of the reason to legalize sports betting was to eliminate illegal offshore sports betting, and obviously that hasn't happened yet. In fact, I was just reading a story quoting Jason Robbins, the CEO of DraftKings today, saying that they're having a hard time converting some of the high value players from the offshore sports books into the legal sports books. Do you see this eventually happening, and that we'll be able to ease those illegal sports books out of it, or is there still a barrier to entry there?
Yeah. It's just too easy, right? And you're having to change behavior for something that had been going on for so long. So I think, and it's almost like personal relationships have developed with people that are continuing to use illegal sites. Like they have almost hosts, right? That extend credit to them. They know them, they trust them, they get their money. They've never had an issue. So it's funny because I think on one hand, it's probably a big pain in the butt because you have to use Western or however you're transferring money. It's probably not the easiest way, but I just think it's easy. And people are kind of inherently lazy. So what is that thing going to be then that's going to motivate someone that's got an easy path, that's got a relationship, who probably is wagering a ton of cash and doesn't want to pay taxes? I mean, that's a big motivating factor in this as well. What is that going to be to get them to then move to the legal regulated market? I don't know. I don't know if that's something that happens legally. I just don't know. I don't know if there's an incentive. The incentive would have to be so great for them to want to do that. So I don't have the answer, unfortunately. I'm sure if I did, Jason Robbins would.
Right. I think ironically, it's almost emphasized illegal sports betting because now they've got these shows on ESPN and all the sports networks about sports betting, and there's still, half the states don't have legal sports betting, and people are going to go searching for a way to do it. And unfortunately, these offshore books are marketing in those states. So, it's probably been a boost for them in some respect.
That's a good point too. You're right.
So, I try to point out it's illegal. Well, what are they going to do?
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny because when we used to do survey research, most people didn't even realize that what they were doing was illegal.
Right, sure.
No idea. Yeah, I mean, if you go type in any of these illegal websites, the SEO, they'll come back and they'll have at the top, this is why it's legal. Right. So it's super confusing. I get it.
And we still have some of the big newspapers quoting lines from Bovada and some of these offshore states.
That needs to stop.
Yeah,
that's a pretty easy one to fix.
Well, Sarah, thanks for the time. It's great talking to you. I always learn something when I talk to you, and I did this time for sure. So thank you, and hopefully we'll see each other in person again pretty soon.
That would be wonderful. Thank you, Roger.
Hope you enjoyed this week's podcast brought to you by IGT, where the Wheel of Fortune Slots is celebrating 25 years as the millionaire maker with 25 weeks of giveaways, contests, and big money fun. Celebrate with them at IGT.com/WOF-slots25. To learn more about the rapid spread and improved technology surrounding sports betting, visit GGBmagazine.com. To get all the news of the gaming industry, particularly of the coronavirus situation and its impact on gaming, including daily updates, subscribe for free at ggbnews.com by using the code GGB180. Don't miss a single episode of the podcast. Subscribe on iTunes or Spotify today. So we'll see you next time on the GGB Podcast.